She told HR that I screamed at her, that I called her worthless, that I threatened her job. In a private call, with no one else there. It was my word against hers, and HR believed her. What neither of us had thought about was that the company had been recording every meeting for years. My name is Marcus. I am 37. I lead a creative team at a marketing and communications agency in Denver. I have managed people for most of a decade, and I have never had a complaint. I'm in my juniors. People ask to be on my team. I tell you this not to brag, but because it is the thing that was about to be erased. There was a copywriter on my team named Sloan. She was talented and ambitious, and she had been passed over for a senior role 2 months earlier. She wanted my job. I did not fully understand how much until later. On a Tuesday, I had a routine one-on-one video call with Sloan. A project check-in. We talked about a campaign. I gave her some feedback on a draft. She pushed back on a point. I agreed with part of it. We moved on. It was 15 minutes. It was the most ordinary kind of meeting there is. I did not think about it again. 8 days later, I was called into a meeting with my manager and someone from HR. They told me a formal complaint had been filed. They told me that in that one-on-one, I had allegedly berated Sloan, called her incompetent and worthless, raised my voice, and told her she would never have a future at the company. They told me I was being placed on administrative leave while they investigated a hostile environment complaint. I want to describe what that felt like, because if you have never been falsely accused of something you cannot prove you did not do, it is hard to explain. It is not like being blamed for a mistake. A mistake leaves evidence. This was an accusation about words spoken in a private call with no witnesses. There was no document to point to. There was just her account and my denial, and I understood immediately that those two things are not weighed equally. HR's entire posture on a complaint like that is to protect the person who filed it. I was a manager. She was my report. The power dynamic meant the benefit of the doubt went to her, automatically, and the burden of proving a negative fell on me. And you cannot prove a negative. You cannot prove you did not say something. That is the whole horror of it. I went home on leave and I sat in a half-empty house, because I was in the middle of a divorce, and I did the math on what a for-cause termination for creating a hostile work environment does to a career in people management. It does not just cost you the job. It is a label that follows you into every reference check for the rest of your working life. He berates his reports. There is no scrubbing that off. I was 37, and I could see the next 20 years bending around this one 15-minute call that had never actually contained the things she said it did. I almost spiraled into building my defense the way the accused always do, which is to gather character witnesses. To get my other reports to say I had never spoken to them that way. To assemble testimonials. All of which would have been true. And none of which would have mattered, because the complaint was not about my general character. It was about 15 specific minutes, and the only thing that could speak to those 15 minutes was those 15 minutes. And then I remembered that the meeting had been recorded. Our company, like a lot of companies now, runs all of its video meetings through a platform that records and transcribes everything to the cloud by default. It is a compliance and training setting. Nobody thinks about it. It had been quietly capturing every call any of us had ever taken for years and storing them with timestamps and full transcripts. I had always found it faintly creepy, the idea that every conversation was being kept. I had half resented it. The one-on-one with Sloan had been recorded exactly like every other meeting. It existed. It was sitting on a server, complete and time-stamped, an exact record of every word that had actually been said in those 15 minutes. I did not have to argue about what happened in that call. I could simply play it back. I requested the recording and the transcript of that specific meeting through our IT and compliance portal. An employee is allowed to request a recording of a meeting they participated in. It came back the next day. I watched the whole thing before I did anything else, partly to be sure my own memory was right, because the accusation had been so confident that some small part of me had started to doubt myself. That is what these things do to you. The recording was exactly what I remembered. 15 minutes of an ordinary project check-in. My voice, level the entire time. Feedback delivered the way I deliver feedback, which is carefully. Sloan responding normally, pushing back on a point, the two of us moving on. None of the words she had reported to HR appeared anywhere in the call, because I had never said them. The transcript, generated automatically, matched the audio line for line. There was no version of this recording that supported a single sentence of her complaint. I did not forward it around the office. I did not send it to Sloan with a triumphant note. I did not even take it to my own manager, who had looked at me across that table like someone already half convinced. I provided the recording and the full transcript to the outside investigator that HR had retained to handle the complaint, with one line. I wrote that the one-on-one in question had been recorded under our standard meeting policy, and that I wanted the investigator to have the complete and accurate record of the call. I attached the file. I sent it. The investigator watched the recording. There is no skill required to evaluate a complaint against a complete recording of the event it describes. The recording did not match the complaint in any particular. Not the tone, not the words, not the threats, none of it. The conversation Sloan had described to HR had simply never taken place. I was called back in on a Thursday. This time it was a different room and a different posture. The investigator was there, and my manager, and the head of HR who had signed my suspension. They had all watched the recording by then. I want to tell you that I took no pleasure in the next part, but that would be a lie. They played the relevant section out loud, in the room, with Sloan sitting across the table. My calm voice. Her normal replies. The feedback delivered the way I deliver it. 15 ordinary minutes, filling a silent conference room, with every person in it now hearing the exact distance between what had happened and what she had sworn happened. Nobody had to say anything. The recording said it. I watched the head of HR, who 8 days earlier had looked at me like a problem to be removed, slowly turn his head toward Sloan. I watched Sloan stop being able to meet anyone's eyes. A false complaint of misconduct is itself misconduct, and a serious one. The same machinery that had been pointed at me swung around and pointed at her. She was escorted out that afternoon. The role she had tried to clear by removing me was filled 3 months later by one of the juniors I had mentored on my recommendation. My manager apologized, not awkwardly this time, but plainly, and put it in writing, and the head of HR personally corrected my file so that the 8 days of suspension were recorded as exonerated rather than left as a shadow. I went back to my team. They had heard, the way teams always hear. The morning I returned, my desk had a coffee and a sticky note from the junior who would later take Sloan's old role. It said, "We knew." 2 words. I kept it. I think about the recording more than I expected to. For years I had felt watched by it, a little resentful of a system that kept every word I ever said at work. But a false accusation is the one kind of attack where the thing that saves you is the very thing you resented, a complete, indifferent record of what actually happened. The surveillance I had quietly hated was the only thing on earth that could prove I had done nothing wrong. So here is what I would tell you. If you ever find yourself in that chair, accused of something you cannot prove you did not do, do not waste your breath swearing you are a good person. Find the record. Somewhere in the systems you resent, the ones quietly logging you all day, there is almost always a witness that cannot be argued with and cannot be charmed. It was watching the whole time. When the day comes that you need it, all you have to do is make it speak.